thought we would finish talking about the first part of the Eightfold Path today. So you all remember we started with, we first named it. We named it as, in English we'll call it wisdom, intuitive wisdom. And it's divided into right understanding and right thought, or wise understanding and wise thought. Or I won't throw these. There's so many different terms. And Jane talked about right thought or right intention. It's also called last week, and she did a very thorough job of it. Thank you very much. And so I wanted to just sort of kind of talk a little bit more about it today, and then we'll move on to the next great division of the Eightfold Path next week. So I think of right understanding as the meaning. Those of you who read the Dharma Corner this week, I was writing about that. Right understanding is the meaning of something. Words convey meaning, but words are not meaning. Meaning is beyond words. So right understanding is, or another way of saying it is that it's really the truth. Right understanding is understanding truth. And anybody want to make a stab at telling me what truth is? Kathy, I can tell you don't because you shook your head. What's truth? What is truth? You know, the only person who can answer that, don't yawn, Cindy. I always catch it when you yawn, don't I? It's just terrible. So who's the only person who can answer what truth is? Janine answered. She did it very quickly. Truth only resides in you. It doesn't reside outside of you. And if you think it does, you're going to be on a long journey for a long, long time. It's like there's a wonderful story of the musk deer. It's a Hindu story, the deer that has this faint, intoxicating smell of musk, and it just searches the world over trying to find it. It travels and travels trying to find that scent of musk, and it's coming from its own body. So truth is that musk, the scent of musk that is coming from you. And so, you can be trying to smell it with me as much as you want to. And sometimes I don't wear deodorant. Oft times I don't wear deodorant. I never wear deodorant. So, but in other words, you could be trying to smell the truth in the teacher, upandita. So we have someone who just came from 30 days of boot camp with upandita. God bless you. He's got blood. You can see the blood coming out of his ears and his nostrils. So you can go to a retreat and listen to the teachers teach about the Dharma. And then you can have the idea that the truth is going to be in the words of the teacher, coming from the scripture, of course, or other great masters. But it's the only thing that those things do is they kind of like pluck the strings of your own truth sense, and then it resonates with you, and then you know it or you don't. But so that actually is what right understanding is. Right understanding is, we would say, it's the understanding of Dharma. And if you want to think of Dharma as truth, but it's where is it coming from? If it doesn't come from you, it ain't coming. So number one, that is And, so as I said, I actually think it's, rather than even going into say, right understanding is understanding the Four Noble Truths or the 12 Nidanas or the seven factors of awakening. We could go through a million lists, can't we? But it's actually, just, if you just remember that it's the meaning, it's you getting the meaning of truth, finding it within yourself. So then whatever that level is inside of you, it's going to be reflected by your thoughts. If you've got ill will inside, what do you think your thoughts are going to look like, right? I know I have, we can harbor ill will for decades. Just decades. It's easy, really. Right? I know people who've been mad at people think about families, like Aunt June or Uncle Henry or, just think about it. But we haven't spoken to that side of the family in 40 years, right? Ill will. So that would be, number one, a sort of a problem with right understanding. And it will be reflected in your thought. So I think of thought as content. It's the content. And as I said in the Dharma Corner, I think it's one of the most wonderful sayings of Martin Luther King, to judge someone not by their color, not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. So when you're by yourself, the content of your thoughts, right? We just let it hang out, right? Well, I just hate that person. Or it's just as easy to say, I hate me. I heard someone say that about themselves the other day. They hate themselves. So the working. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit more today about working with thought, because to some extent it's more accessible, at least. I do think right understanding is again, it's like everything begins with right understanding. But on the other hand, it's also easily the most difficult of each of the 8 steps. Right understanding, we end the whole thing with enlightenment. If you want to believe that there is such a thing, it really comes from the opening of transcendental wisdom. I think so. I love T-shirts. I'm always thinking of T-shirts that we can sell, and no one ever manifests it. I'll say, Travis, let's do this T-shirt. I've got a great idea for a T-shirt. Let's do this. No one ever does it. It's just the bane of my life, right? I have these great ideas, but no one runs with them. So I said a long time ago that one T-shirt that we should all wear is a T-shirt that just says, "Think Dharma." Hello? That's right thought. That's what right thought is. Think Dharma. I made that up myself. It's brilliant. Think Dharma. I actually would suggest to you that I think that's probably, I'm sorry to say this because this is just throwing more stuff into the pot, but it's probably true that is really the 4th foundation of mindfulness. Probably Think Dharma is actually the 4th foundation of mindfulness, but I would say that a little bit lightly because a lot of people would disagree. So you don't need to worry about that. Just forget that I said that. Just skip that. Just put that away. Right. Just, erase that from there. Well, no, I haven't said a bad word yet. Eric was so great. I said something really dreadful 3 weeks ago. And I said, Eric, you've got to delete that. He did. So I'm just talking along, right, blah, 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 and then all of a sudden there's just like this little phase, and then and then I just go around, and who knows that I said blankety blank. Okay, so Think Dharma, that's right thought. Right thought is Think Dharma. So I wanted to show you all this other thing, and then I'm going to read something, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Dharma talk on Saturday. But a dear friend sent me this for Christmas a couple of years ago. Thinking, non-thinking. Does everyone, do you all know that? I mean, I've talked about it a million times. Thinking, non-thinking. There's a famous story of the monk who was sitting there. And then so I guess I was another monk of equal, probably same level of attainment, and said, what are you doing? No, he said, what are you doing? I think that's the way it goes. Please, I can't remember it now. I'm having a little bit of a non-thinking issue. What are you doing? I guess he said, what are you thinking about? He says, I'm not thinking. That's it. He says, what are you thinking about as you're sitting there? So I could say that to Wendy. What are you thinking when you're sitting there? Or Jane? Or John? What are you thinking when you're sitting there on that cushion? And so the monk said, not thinking. And then the monk said, well, how do you do that? And then he said, thinking, non-thinking. You think about non-thinking. So, so let's talk about for a minute, if you're going to be sitting in meditation and you are thinking. We're going to say something in a minute about non-thinking. But let's begin with your thinking. So this is what, okay, I'm going to try to make a stab at his name. Churchy. C-H-I-H. Now, in Chinese, I think I-H is an E-er sound, but who knows? It looks like chi-chi, but I think it's jerchy. So I can't do this, you know. It's like I've told you all many, many times, why these Chinese don't have English names, I will never understand. You know, isn't it just, don't they understand that everybody speaks English, right? So anyway, he said, we sit up with right thoughts. We sit up with right thoughts, contemplating the true nature of all things. Now, can you imagine if you're going to be sitting and thinking about anything, how about contemplating the true nature of all things? What about that as an idea? As opposed to, right, how many fish you're going to sell this week, right? And then he goes on. And then he goes through this whole list, and it's quite wonderful. So just bear with me. Merit and demerit, good and bad, memory and forgetfulness. So thinking about memory or thinking about forgetfulness. The false consciousnesses that arise from sense perception of objects and from the process of the mind. All kinds of impure outflowings of the mind, evil passions, all the laws in the triple world of cause and effect, of birth and death, of change and not, of doing and not, of doing and not doing. Excuse me for not reading well. Doing and not doing. This is what you're thinking about, he said. All are known within the grasp of the mind. Understanding that all of these thoughts are nothing but thoughts in the mind. So, in other words, not getting lost in the thoughts, not grabbing that thought and eating it, as I used to say, chewing on it, right? But knowing it's just your mind. It's just thoughts in your mind. So, if you contemplate the nature of all things, according to these Chinese people who clearly didn't know anything, you come to this understanding, and they say that everything, every single thing, is just in your mind. What's not in your mind? Name me something that in this moment is not in your mind. If you name it, it's in your mind. And if you explore the nature of what is in your mind, Brad, you begin to discover that it's empty. And if you discover that the thoughts are empty, then you then begin to understand that if there's emptiness in your thoughts, and then this same teacher says you discover that there's no personality in your mind. I love that. There's no personality in your mind. If there's no personality in your mind, then there's no personality outside of your mind. And you just begin to understand the true nature of all things. That's right thought or right thinking, right? You understand? In other words, and then we will go on and say, or how about contemplating as you're sitting, the nature of the person who's thinking. I had a brilliant thought while I was sitting. For years and years and years and years, I have loved and taught. The William James says that the passing thought is itself the thinker. That's one of his real most famous sayings. The passing thought is itself the thinker. And Mark Epstein, in his wonderful book, says thought without a thinker. It's the title of that. But and I've always just, this is kind of like a historical moment here, right? Because I've changed my mind about that. Because I think that rather than saying the passing thought is itself the thinker, or to say there is no thinker, I think if you sit and work with right thought and work with your thoughts, you actually begin to experience an imagined thinker. It's kind of easy to say there's no thinker, right? I mean, that's like really profound. Oh God, there's no thinker, right? So Beverly, you have a thought and you say, well, there's no thinker. I've got to remember that there is no thinker. That's what we do, and but that's not investigating it and trying to be with the thinking process as you watch it and just discover there is this felt sense of me thinking. It's always there. It's always there. If you're just sensitive enough to sit with it. It's like, Wendy, you're saying, well, I've got a lot of things I have to do tomorrow. And then you can look at that thought, right? And you can say, oh, there's no Wendy in that, right? But that's not really, that's a thought looking at a thought. That thought, oh, there's no Wendy. Well, who said that? It's another thought. The thought said there's no Wendy in there. But the silent looking at it, it takes your breath away because you can experience just like a pretend person who's in there thinking. And when you see that pretend person, there will not be a thought, oh, that's not me. It's an awareness. You just see it. You just know it. And then it's gone. It is truly gone. So I'm suggesting to you would be working with thought is to, rather than saying that there is no thinker, to me, what is really brilliant is to develop this ability to look and to be with that thinker, to see who it is that calls itself Travis and is worried about, lots of things coming up in the next few months. Well, I didn't say what it was, did I? I have tremendous boundaries as I've gotten older. So, if you see that there's somebody that thinks he's thinking his thoughts, if you see that, what are you going to see? What are you going to see? I mean, you're not going to see anything. You're not going to see, like a double Beverly or a double Bradley or a double, you're not going to see anything. You're going to see emptiness. So, and that's very powerful. So now I want to switch very quickly and go to the next part so that we'll have some time for pithy questions. That was pithy question. So we had a kind of a accident on Saturday, so I gave this brilliant Dharma talk, and so we, but actually it was over 2 or 3. I mean, it was that my talks are, well, they're interesting. So anyway, a number of people came up and said that they were really, they were looking forward to seeing it on YouTube again, because it was a subject I'd never talked about. And then we didn't get the sound. So I decided to talk about it again a little bit, because it is also right thought. So I'll read you what I read to the people on Saturday by Churchy, Chi-Chi, Choo-Choo, VB. It's really wonderful. And he's really just pretty unknown in the Buddhist, I mean, he's a big deal. But he wasn't Zen, he wasn't in China, and he isn't, obviously is not Indian nor Theravadan, and so he's not extremely well known, and yet he was like a major deal. And he wrote about 550 Common Era or AD. And so he wrote this wonderful volume called Jhana for Beginners. So I'm not going to go into it as much as I did last time, but it's important for you to understand what does the word jhana mean? Dhyana. Beverly, you were there, so you know. I bet you do. Jhana means that's the Hindu. That's the yoga word for meditation. Jhana means meditation. And when meditation went to China and the Zen Chan, Chan, started, which, as many of you know, is probably my favorite. It's my favorite branch of Buddhism, Chan. If you just really kind of say jhana, Chan is the Chinese word for jhana. It's the same thing. And it's fascinating. So in other words, if you say you do Chan Buddhism, if you do Chan meditation, that means you do meditation. And if you take Chan and you move to Japan and you say Zen, it actually means jhana. They're all three. However that gets into Japanese, I don't know. But jhana, which means is the yoga word for meditation, is the Chan, which is meditation, and in Zen, which is meditation. So he wrote this book called Jhana for Beginners. In other words, meditation for beginners. There are a few of us in this room who could probably get something out of that book. It would be including me. So I'll read the first thing he said. It's quite wonderful. There are many paths to nirvana. Now, yoga says there are 4 paths to nirvana: karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, and jnana yoga, not jhana, but jnana. The path of knowledge, the path of meditation, the path of love. Some of you I would think most of the people in here, it's just your love for me. But there are people, there are people who are mostly bhaktis, right? They're the love of, certainly, you could say Christianity is a bhakti religion, really, the love of Jesus, right? That's bhakti yoga. And then karma is where you really, your work is your practice. So Buddhism is to a large extent focused on jhana, or meditation, as the path to nirvana. But he rightly says, and rightly so, there are many paths to nirvana. But the most important one for us, as a Buddhist, right, is the path of jhana, the path of meditation. Jhana is the practice of mind control. Okay, so I paused on Saturday for effect, and I'm pausing again for effect. How many of you like the term mind control? Raise your hand. You do? Most of us have a real aversion to the idea of mind control. It's like, we go to the Massachusetts flag, the snakes that don't tread on me. Really, I think most of us, it's like the idea of the government, the or you remember, like, how have we reacted to NASA nosing into our emails and our phone calls, and Snowden over there right in the transit lounge at Moscow airport, and most of us do not like control. Unfortunately, of course, that means most of us are control freaks, right? It's like we try to control everything because we hate control. But I mean, God forbid that somebody outside me try to control me, right? I mean, it creates such aversion. And if that's really true, if you think about it, if we have this aversion to something outside controlling us, where would that come from except like something inside that has an aversion to control? So I'm just going to suggest to you, even Janine probably, unbeknownst to her, I think that we have an unconscious resistance to control that is so profound that we actually are continuing with that every moment that we're sitting. Wonder why you go to sleep. You could come to a sit and be very energized, right? Just feeling just fresh as a daisy. And 5 minutes later, you're snoring. Wonder what that is. Wonder what that's about. I mean, why do you sort of get really sleepy? Or in reverse, you come to the sit and you start spinning out, right? Restlessness. Wonder what that's about. Could that be an unconscious resistance to anything on earth controlling little moi? I think since we were little and had to tolerate those adults, those stupid adults telling us what to do, or those teachers, sit in your chair and be still, Victor, right? I mean, I really thought, the hell with you. But, there's really a true story that my father was such a problem. They kicked him out of school. This is a true story. They kicked him out of a little country school one day because he had ADHD, as did his son, or does his son. And he went up on a bank and took rocks and threw them in the window and broke the windows of the school. He was a problem child. No one ever controlled him, ever. And my mother could attest to that. So I'm going to suggest to you that there's a kind of a wildness that in us, and it's tamed to different levels. I mean, some of you are good boys and good girls, and some of you are not so good. But anyway, it's on different levels. But I do suggest that sitting in meditation is about, as he says, mind control. And if we have an aversion to mind control, well, hello. I mean, that's very useful, isn't it? It's very useful to say, oh, my goodness, it never occurred to me, never entered my mind that maybe I don't like, a technique that tells me how to control my mind. To hell with that. I will do meditation. I'm all for meditation as long as I can be in control of it, right? Is that not so? As long as I'm in control of it. And, of course, who is that? Who's going to be in control of it? But something that is somewhat out of control. So he says, meditation is the practice of mind control by which we stop all thinking and seek to realize truth in its essence. Okay, well, let me interrupt one more time, and I'm not going to go on for too much longer, probably about 50 minutes. And so how many people here, and I don't want to put you on this, but how many people think that you can stop your thought? Just stop it in your tracks. I mean, just in its tracks, right? Wendy? I'm not going to embarrass you. So, does anybody really think that you can just literally stop your thoughts? I mean, you could just sort of just kind of silently raise your hand up like that. I'll see it. Okay. 15 people raised their hand. That's a big lie. Okay, so he says that mind control is learning how to stop your thoughts. Oh my goodness. That's a whole nother level of right thought, isn't it? And I'm going to suggest to you that it's something that you don't hear so much about. It's really definitely Mahayana Buddhism. as opposed to what we study, Theravada. Okay, I'll say something else parenthetically. This is like, see, this is the way my mind goes. I'm sorry. I just can't do a thing about it. The truth is, it's kind of like, it's not like a dirty secret. I mean, the Buddha talks constantly in the Pali scriptures about the four great absorptions, the great jhanas, or the five, or there are actually 8. What happens at the second one is all thought stops. That's samadhi. It is said that he stayed in samadhi much of the day. That's no thought. I don't know exactly. That's another Dharma talk and another, it's interesting. It's not talked about in Theravada, in Vipassana. We talk about noting but we don't talk about the fact that really the Buddha clearly urged people to develop concentration to the place that thought stops. But I don't understand that, and I'm going to go on with it. I'm just going to read, okay? So he says, by which we stop all thinking and seek to realize truth in its essence. He would be suggesting that truth pops up when you're not thinking, right? That if the thought is not like a lid that's covering the deeper, what I would call intuitive wisdom, it's like the wisdom is already there. That's what I said when you already are the truth. But you could think yourself to death. Okay, then he says it is the practice of, and this is what I wanted to say, stopping and realizing. This is a wonderful little volume, stopping and realizing. If we cease all discriminative thought, it will keep us from further accumulation of error. There's a no-brainer. There's a real no-brainer. If you stop yourself right from thinking, right, then of course you're going to stop continuing to accumulate error in terms of wrong thinking. While the practice of realizing will clear away delusion. And then he says, stopping, I love this. Stopping is a refreshment of the lower consciousness, while realizing can be compared to a golden spade that opens up a treasure of transcendental intelligence. That might be another way of talking about right thought. So stopping is a refreshment of the lower consciousness. What he means by that, or what is the lower consciousness in Mahayana Buddhism, actually in Theravada too. The lower consciousness is the consciousness of touch. Do you have consciousness of touch right now? Do you have consciousness of your body, Nicholas? That's consciousness. It's nothing but that. Consciousness. Who has consciousness of hearing? Who has consciousness of seeing? Who has consciousness of the heat in the room, right? So that's what they mean by the lower consciousnesses, right? They mean there's the 5 sense doors are each a mind in Buddhism. And so, I don't know if you think this, but I certainly think my eyes have a mind of their own. They go wherever they want to, and they pull the mind, right? The mind goes with where the eyes go, or the ears. But then the 6th one is the discriminating. The part of the mind that's the thing that just doesn't stop while we're sitting, right? That's the discriminating mind, consciousness, right and wrong, up and back, making lists, thinking. So there's a higher consciousness that essentially we cannot really contact, that intuitive wisdom. We can't contact that if we're just completely lost in the content of thinking. So he says stopping thought refreshes the lower consciousness because it's at rest. And then we become available to maybe something, who knows, you might have a bright thought in there, John. Who knows, you could surprise yourself. Duh, well, my God. I have been. I'm amazed. I'm sure that Jane has this, and I don't know about mine. When I'm on a 1-month retreat or a 2-month retreat, I'm always astounded, because it always shocks me, and that's a clue about something really amazing. I suddenly start getting smart. And I mean, I don't know where it's coming from. Now, how could that be? I've been doing this for 40 years. But I'm always surprised by it. So you see, that's really, there's something tremendously sad about that, right? I mean, that when one is lost in the lower consciousness, you can't even remember that there's more. You can have been on the top of a mountain, but when you're in the lower consciousness, there's not a memory of it. Reality is just, my toenails growing or whatever, right? I'm not going off on that. But so the lower consciousness is where we mostly live. And so he says that the only way you can really get in control of this is to stop it. Now, if you think that you can't stop thought, you've got a big problem. Because you've been sold a can of beans. I don't know what that would be. How do you stop thought? First of all, now here's a big surprise. How do you stop thought? You have to know you're thinking. That's the first step. It's so easy to skip that one, isn't it, right? Oh, I've got to stop thinking. I've got to stop thinking. Well, you see, right there, I've got to stop thinking. That's thinking. So after the Saturday set, someone came up to me and she said, and she's been coming and she's been working really hard, and she said, you know what? She said, as far as I know, she said, I only had one long period of being lost in thought where I suddenly, she said, I couldn't believe it. Right? I was very happy to hear that. So, what is it that you're sitting, okay, so you've been sitting for the past, 15 minutes, and suddenly, oh my God, something comes in, and suddenly you realize you've been off on a vacation, right? You've been in Timbuktu, you've been climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. What is that? It's called mindfulness. Sati. That's what mindfulness is. That's why it's kind of important. Because you see, if you don't have mindfulness, you're not going to wake up. And every moment that you are thinking in meditation, again, as we just say, discriminative thinking, just on and on. Every moment that you suddenly go, you just woke up. That's called waking up. That's all it is. It's just waking up. Now, you could sit for, a long time and not wake up, right? I mean, many of us have done that for a long time. So you wake up, okay? You wake up for just a second. Oh my God, Beverly says, oh my goodness, I've been thinking about my children. I've been thinking, she's got a lot of children, so you got a lot of thoughts. I've been thinking about Marisa over in Catalina. Okay, so you wake up for a second. Okay, now what happens? Okay, so he says, number one, you could bring your mind back to your meditation object, right? That would be called concentration. So you see, you can't do it without that next part. So you can come to the tip of your nose. You have this thought, you come to the tip of your nose, and you stay with that. Or you have this, or you see the thought, and you come and you watch your belly moving, or whatever your meditation object is. But that's then that's bringing concentration in. So that may last 5 seconds. It may not last 2 seconds. But it's the beginning of technique. Number one, it's the beginning of understanding, right, that you did stop thought for a second. And I'm going to repeat this. If you walk around thinking you can't stop thinking, I mean, you're just shot out of the saddle. What the hell are we doing here, right? I mean, I'm just telling you can. Now, here's another one that this is really good. Okay, so you're thinking, and you wake up. Boop, okay. Focus on that thought. It's gone, but focus on it. You can, it's still right there, right at the edge of conscious. Don't let it go. Okay, so what was it? I did this morning. I can't remember what it was. Probably thinking about, oh God, I don't want to go down there and teach those people. So I'm thinking. I was thinking something, and then and then I thought. So I stopped it. I saw it, and it stopped. But I didn't try to go to my meditation object. I thought, okay, so let's just go along with him here. So then I just focused on and stayed with that thought. Okay? So then that's called examining. That's called stopping and examining. Examining the thought. What's it made up of? Who's thinking? You look at it. You just stay with it. It will go away, but you stay with it so that you can look at it. If you've developed the ability to concentrate your breath and stay with examining, you develop your ability to stop and stay with the no thought will increase. It just will. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's just like working in a gym. It's just a no-brainer. But first of all, you have to open to the idea that it's really kind of a good thing to stop thinking, And we're not talking about, like, oh my God, is he saying then I'll just never get to think again as long as I live? We're simply talking about what? Mind control or mind mastery, becoming the mistress of your mind as opposed to your mind controlling you all the time. So to me, I think that this is, I'm not sure about this, but I think it's rarely talked about, and I don't quite understand it. We're more focused on working with the mind, or working with thoughts, right? But the idea of stopping them doesn't seem to be that emphasized, and so I do believe to some extent it's because we've kind of like just decided you can't do that after being, we start thinking when we're 3, and then that's it. We're off to the races, right? It just never stops. But there's no question that the mind becoming still and at rest and in a place of not a stupefaction, not being blank, not being emptiness in that sense of a void, but at this place where you're not being pulled by thoughts. That is where insight can come. That's where true insight, what this whole thing is about, that's where it can come. We want to think that insight comes by thinking about it. Right? If I think about it, what we're taught is that, right, that think about emptiness, think about no self, think about I think about this, and oh yeah, that's really true. But it doesn't come from thinking. It comes from not thinking. It comes from having the courage not to think. And I think this is something Krishnamurti just said over and over and over, talked about. The courage to not think. So, you can't get up and walk out the door and, say, this was a good talk, Victor. I enjoyed it. We're not going to go home and say, oh, well, I think I'll not think in the car. All the way home, I'm going to not think, and Brad will be walking. No. It's a lifetime practice. And certainly at first, it's done right here. This is about where we do it. And then certainly to some extent, we can attempt to. I think that the word stop, like how many parents would commit suicide if they didn't have the word stop in their vocabulary. Can you imagine? Like if you were a parent, right, and they said, well, the one word you can never use with your child is stop. So, you all are at Walmart or wherever. So stop is a it's like, for me, it's brilliant. This is brilliant. Stopping occurs before realizing. Most of us were more at the level of stopping and examining, right? Which is great. But stopping that relentless doing and being and becoming, that relentless need to push on. I had a friend who used to talk about pushing on, and I thought, but aren't you just getting tired of pushing on? Huh? Did you remember that movie, The Maids? At the end of the movie, one of the maids says to this just a terrible woman, I can't remember, but I think she says, "Aren't you just tired? Aren't you just tired of this endless being, whipped around by your own mind? That one thing that you can control. That one thing." It's the only thing you have been given that you have total power over. What else do you have power over? Right? I shall not die. There's a good one. I shall not grow old. I shall be beautiful. I shall be rich. Well, okay. I shall control my mental process. You've got a shot at that. Every single one of you. You have a shot at that. Now, if you have control over your mental processes, don't you suspect that would mean that maybe you wouldn't have an issue with sorrow, with sadness?